Welcome to Cultivating Victory Live. Our special guest today is Marvin Ropp. Marvin, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Marvin, tell us a little bit about what got you into the health and wellness industry.
Well, that's a good question. I was 20 years ago. If you told me I was out there, teaching how to recognize the symptoms of mineral deficiencies in plants, animals, in your family, I would have just laughed. I would just laugh in your face and said, "Oh, that'll never happen." I have an engineering background, and so after I retired with the Navy, I went into engineering, essentially commercial construction management, and so I was working big defense contracts, and for Lockheed Martin as well as L3 Communication. But 2007 is when my last contract with L3 expired, and we finished that project. And my next project I was assigned to, I was one of 20 construction managers assigned to build a border fence. Boeing and L3 Communication got the contract to build a virtual border fence. And so what we did is they wanted to move my family back to Washington, D.C. L3 wanted me to. And that was kind of their way of kind of giving me another promotion or kind of like grooming me for more corporate status. And because this is a very high profile project. And I hadn't even got these words out of my mouth. I said, well, I just don't really feel comfortable moving my family back to Washington, D.C. It's, well, thank you very much, Mr. Ropp. We got somebody else for your job. It's business as usual, right? So that's corporate America for you. Up to that point, I had been using Dr. Wallach's nutrition protocols for healthy bones and joints and some other health issues and since 2002. And it just naturally started to, I had seen great success with it. And a lot of people were asking me, so what is it that you're doing, Marvin, that you've had such good success? You look healthier. You just, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm doing this longevity thing. I'm doing the Dr. Wallach thing. Okay, so they wanted me to do that. That's kind of how I got started. But once I got involved into the health and nutrition counseling, I realized there was a big opportunity in the agriculture industry. I grew up in the farming community, and that's one thing that Dr. Wallach taught me. He taught me how to recognize the symptoms of mineral deficiencies, and I started seeing these same mineral deficiencies in animals, in fertility. I started seeing things like joint problems in chickens, poultry industry, a lot of feathers, more feathers on the ground than on the birds. And so we had, of course, I got to know Dr. Wallach through this time. He said, well, Marvin, those are all lack of minerals. Ask the farmer what kind of mineral program that he's using. And so that's kind of how it started. With that said, I was looking for work at the same time I was consulting. And before I knew it, I was making more money promoting Dr. Wallach's 98 for Life message than I was actually, consulting, that I was actually working my engineering degree. So that's kind of how I got started. I was never looking for this, never wanted this. I had no intention of ever doing this as a career. But before I realized it, I realized there was a need, a big need out there to educate and teach people. I did start predominantly with the Amish and Mennonite communities. And the reason why I come with that background, so I saw a lot of what I would call ignorance in those communities. Very intelligent people, but they're ignorant because they don't have access to the resources that you and I have access to. But one of the things about those communities is that those people groups are that they're looking for things, natural things. They tend to shy away from the pharmaceuticals and the chemicals and things like that. I grew up on a farm. My dad did not believe in chemical fertilizer. I mean, we use chicken manure, hog manure, and everything comes out of our right to fertilize the crops. Matter of fact, we would range turkeys, 5,000 turkeys a year, and we would move them from one spot to the next on the farm, and that was our way of bringing this organic matter back into the soil from a non-chemical point of view. And we had pretty good success in farming, but we didn't have the success in farming as what we could have had we understood the law of minimum or using the minerals. So as I start working with the minerals,
that's an important point.
Well, Mary, you brought up a real good important point. I didn't even know what the law of minimum was until 2010. I was taught that by a Japanese scientist by the name of Dr. Mariata. I cannot pronounce his name correctly. Dr. Mariata is his name. And he came to America. He wanted to take a tour of all the farmers I've been working with that have been the animals have been consuming the blooming minerals. So what we're doing is taking these minerals, the prehistoric plant minerals, adding to existing feeding program. And we add that to existing feeding program, and we saw results we couldn't give the conventional mineral program. That's really what it came down to. Now, with that said, the question I was asking myself, why is it that these horses, pigs, cows, chickens, high-fence, white-tailed deer, goats, were not getting the minerals they need in a conventional mineral program? Because I talked to the farmers, they haven't changed their conventional mineral program over the last, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, as long as they've been farming. But one thing I've realized is that over the past, since the mid-90s, we see a big decline. And if you look at any agriculture magazine, you saw a big decline in what we call nutrient-dense feed. And nutrient-dense feed is referring to feed that has enough nutrition in there to support healthy reproductive capability. And you see that term a lot in the agriculture industry, nutrient-dense feed. One of the things that we learned very quickly is that one of the negative side effects of glyphosate is a chemical in Roundup, is that it's a heavy metal chelator. Okay, so what they'll do is they'll go ahead and they'll genetically modify a protein of the grain in order so they can use the chemical to kill the weeds. So basically the selling pitch is you want to go ahead and reduce compaction. Well, if you talk to a farmer, if he doesn't have to go out there and cultivate his corn and his soybeans, that saves him a lot of time and money. And of course, the big thing is compaction, these big tractors packing down the soil and things like that. And so they were sold the idea that that was the better way to go. Now, the farmers, they didn't do their homework. They didn't do their background, to find out, okay, is this chemical, what's the negative side effect of the chemical? How is it going to affect, the end user? And so the farmers got on board with it. They got on board with the herbicides. And it was the best thing since, since sliced bread as far as they're concerned. They didn't have to, they're out there, they plant and they spray and they harvest. They don't have to go out there, pull the tractor out of the barn and do the cultivating and killing the weeds. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. But what we discovered is that the glyphosate itself, what it does is that it actually prevents mineral uptake into the plant. They won't tell the farmers that they are raising corn and soybeans and wheat, barley, rye, and oats that is lacking the mineral uptake. And so the other negative side effect is the more chemicals you have in your soil, the less organic matter you're going to have. The organic matter is how alive your soil is. Okay, so what we're learning over the years is that this is kind of is how we start mineralizing the soil, get rid of these chemicals, we're starting to increase organic matter. And I always ask the farmers, let me ask you a question. It says, the primary nutrients of a fertilizer program is NPK, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, right? Why are you putting a chemical fertilizer, a chemical nitrogen on the ground when it's available in the air? The plant was designed to get their to get their nitrogen out of the air. Well, the farmer can't answer that question. I said, why don't you go back and tell your fertilizer guy, I want to go pay you for the 2 primary nutrients, not the third. The third is nitrogen, because I can get it from the air for free. Well, and he laughed at me. He said, well, that'll never happen. Of course it won't happen. So what we taught the farmers to do is we taught them to put chemical fertilizers, NPK, on the farm. Now, why do they do that? Well, let's take a big step backwards. And we go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. We were running out of farmland. And if you remember, you read history books, you had farmers, you call them sodbusters back then, back in the 1800s. They were moving west and they would stake a new farm, a new claim. They start farming this prairie ground. They plow where the prairie ground was very fertile at the time, 10, 15 years. That was about it. They couldn't raise the crops that they used to the first 2-3 years when they first, so they pulled up stake and moved west. Well, there was plenty of land in the Midwest back in the 1800s. By the time they reached the Rocky Mountains, there was not enough land left. That was it. They pretty well depleted the minerals out of the topsoil. And so the cattlemen and the sodbusters, they got in a big dispute. And of course, the cattle ranchers didn't like them. They called them sodbusters. Well, they solved this problem. They solved this problem by coming up with the chemical fertilizers. Because beginning of the early 1900s, in the oil industry, whatever, so they came up with the chemical fertilizers, and that solved the problem with the NPK problem. One thing they didn't understand and realize back then is that when you put chemicals in the soil, it kills off the decomposers. Those decomposers in our soil are designed to decompose those corn stalks and all that plant matter that's left over after the harvest. And interesting enough, I've talked to farmers. He's jumped forward today. Talked to farmers who have cornfields and soybean crop fields cornfields. They tell me that if they raise bug-resistant corn has been genetically modified as bug-resistant. They plow that corn stalk over, and 5 years later, that corn stalk is still there. It's not decaying. Why? Because the consumers are not consuming that corn stalk. I mean, a corn stalk should be decaying. You plow that under in the fall. In the springtime, there's very little evidence of any corn stalk. It's always decomposed, whatever. And so now what they have to do is they have to come in with a chemical, a decomposition chemical. It's kind of like we did in Vietnam, Agent Orange. What was Agent Orange for? It was a defoliation of the jungle, right? They actually came in there and they sprayed Agent Orange on the jungle to basically defoliate that jungle. And so essentially that's kind of what they're doing now. They're basically doing a decomposition of the plant matter. And so what is the negative side effect that? Unintended consequences. Well, unintended consequences is that we're losing the organic matter in our soil. That's really what is happening right now. And our farmland in the Midwest is being depleted of these decomposers, organic matter. And we're looking at, if you're talking to agronomists, you're looking at your organic matter is down to 1.5. If you can find a farm that's being farmed on a regular basis out there with organic matter of 2.5 and or higher, you're doing really good, okay? Now, I've talked to farmers which are able to get their, by using these minerals, they can't get that organic matter back up to, 4.5 to 5. That's unheard of in the ag industry. So I guess I need to kind of stop here a little bit, Mary, because we kind of, I probably have tons of questions for me, because I'm kind of giving a quick overview how I got involved in this and kind of run a couple of rabbit trails here, but kind of give you a big picture as far as, okay, why are the farmers in this bad condition, and why are we in this situation? And also, too, what can we do to help these farmers? What can we do to get them on board with what I call the organic non-GMO movement? And really, that's what's going to save this country, is organic non-GMO movement.
Marvin, I just have to share something here on the screen, because when you were talking about the problem with nitrogen, it's one that I actually wrote about, talking about solar-powered nitrogen factories and why we have to get these microorganisms back into the soil, because they fix atmospheric nitrogen and feed plants. And these are things that for years, these topics were basically of no interest to the general public, and so you didn't really talk about them. And I think that's what we're missing in our whole health and nutrition picture. Because if you don't understand that your food is being grown in soils that have lost their capacity to transfer nutrients to crops, then you're not going to understand why the food you're eating is not providing you with adequate nutrition.
One thing, Mary, I want to just kind of add to what you're just saying is that I love your illustration. Now, coming from let's talk to the farm boy for a second. That farm boy out there that wants to go fishing. Where's he going to find most of these fish worms? In the cornfield that has been heavily chemicalized with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and or in the forest. See, the farmer does not have to put NPK on his forest to keep a thriving forest. Because those trees, the leaves fall off, they create an organic matter for the soil. And you see plenty of fish worms, you see plenty of those decomposers in the soil. The soil is very much alive in the forest. And that's where you're going to find your fish worms. And that's where the country boy goes to find his fish horns to go fishing. So going back to Mary, what you're talking about is that that soil is so critical. We have to take care of that soil. And if we don't have a healthy soil, we don't have an organic matter. We don't have that organic matter. The plant cannot get its nitrogen from the air like you were talking about, because God created that nitrogen for the purpose to nutrify that plant.
Marvin, let me share something with you that's happened at my farm. You had always talked about, and I've attended your agricultural speeches before, about how these minerals will attract animals in. If you were to take these minerals and spray like a grassy meadow and set up a game camera, you'll notice all kinds of animals coming in. And what's happened at my farm here within the last 5-6 weeks now, I have a visiting elk down in Longmont, Colorado, and they don't get this low typically. And this elk has just hung around and has made friends with the cows and the sheep, and it is quite remarkable. I'm scratching my head. Could that be why that elk's there? I'm not sure, but I just wanted to share.
You know, you bring up a really good point, is that one of the things that I've done is I live here in Utah, and I'm an outdoor enthusiast. And the first experiment I did with this was back in 2011, 2012. We found a meadow about 10,000 feet that we always saw signs of elk, mule deer in that meadow. So we put a trail camera up. We put down a Redmond mineral block on the trail camera. And around that Redmond mineral block, we put down some humic shell, the blooming minerals, 40-pound bag. And we just took one of those handheld crank fertilizer spreaders that we use for your lawn. And we just spread that blooming about 100 feet radius around that mineral block. So the objective was to see which one the animals will go after first, the mineral block or the plants. Now, the first year we did that, we had no animals actually grazing, and no animals on the mineral block, no animals grazing. They just walked through the meadow, just kind of raging through. And the second year, by the time those minerals got soaked down from the snow runoff and the snow melt, they soaked down into the subsoil. And the second year, we had 2012, we had over 5,000 pictures on the trail camera. Now, the best kind of the rough estimate, we figured we have about 30 different animals coming into that meadow on a regular basis. And what was interesting is that, and we got pictures of this, is you see mature bull elk and young mule deer bucks grazing in the same meadow within less than 100 feet of each other. You will never see that. Matter of fact, I've shown this picture to outdoor enthusiasts that love to hunt, and they tell me that it's impossible. Where's that picture? And so, but the picture tells us that these animals are not threatened. The nutrient density in that meadow, the forage that meadow, is so high to where the animals are not threatened by each other's presence, not even from other species. So if you are, what we know is that when elk move into a basin, the mule deer will leave. Okay, the mule deer will leave. And so they don't basically like to share their feed with each other. And so when the elk leave, the mule deer come back in. And so we took this experiment one step further. We went to another location in the high Uintas where there's a lot of mountain goats. And we put the minerals down on a mountain goat meadow. I call it mountain goat meadow. This is it's between about 11,000 feet. And so it's right by at the tree line, basically. And we've been doing this now for 4 years. And the amazing thing is that we don't put anything else but minerals down. As these minerals get saturated into the soil, the granular stuff, it gets into the plants. And we are seeing mountain goats, mule deer, elk, and moose come through those meadows. And one interesting, and I don't know if you saw one of my presentations or not, but 2 years ago, my son and I, he carried a couple apples with him on our lunch, and we took a lunch break while we're out there putting the minerals down. So he said, "Daddy, let's put the apple on the rock and see who gets it first." So he put an apple on the rock. And I never picked up on this until about 6 months after we recovered the trail camera. I realized that as going through the pictures, July to August, going through the pictures, I noticed the apple was still sitting on the rock. I noticed a couple of trail camera photos of mountain goats, elk, and mule deer coming up to the apple and sniffing it and going back crazy. And you and I both know that if we put an apple out in a barnyard, it won't last very long. So that was a tremendous testimony. But what that told me, the mineral content in that apple was less than the mineral content in that forage, that grass, that meadow. So how these animals know the difference between the mineral content just by sniffing it, I don't know. I mean, it was over a month before a mule deer finally ate the apple. That apple sat on that rock for over a month. And that's a testimony of how we're able to, these minerals will actually start to attract animals. Now, in the hunting industry, the outdoor enthusiasts will tell you, if you go out in the spring looking for sheds or looking for a game sign, you always see these animals grazing right at the snow level. The reason why, because the first snow melt, the growth after the first snow melt has the most nutrient density. And animals given a choice, free-ranging animals given a choice, they will always find the feed that has higher nutrient density. The animals in our feedlots, horses, the pigs, the cows, the chickens, they don't have that choice. They don't have that choice to do free-ranging. And I have thousands of chickens on mineralized water. I walk into these chicken houses that don't have a good mineral program. I see more feathers on the ground than I see on the backs of the birds. And that's the same concept. If you and I have premature hair loss, it's because of lack of nutrients. That's all it is. And so the hair follicle's dying off. And so what we've learned is real quickly is that if we want to raise a healthy chicken or turkey, antibiotic free, we have to have all the 75 known different minerals in there. Ideally, there's 60 of those that are essential. But this is one of the things that we've learned, and the agriculture industry does not teach that. This is what's amazing to me, is that when I was developing the label, for one of our products, we listed the primary nutrients, the secondary nutrients, and the micronutrients, which is a total of 16. And Mary, I know you're very familiar with those. Right. But there's 59 other minerals, which they call beneficial substances. And I was talking to this gentleman. He was the head department of the agriculture of this university. He said, Marvin, why would you want to list those 59 other beneficial substances on a label for a mineral supplement for animals? We don't even recognize that as part of a required feeding program. And I asked him the question if he understood the law of minimums as it applies to a plant. And I asked him the question if he understood how these minerals will maximize a plant or an animal's genetic potential. And he couldn't answer those questions. And this man has a PhD. He is employed by a well-known university, which I will not name. Okay. But the unfortunate part about it is he was teaching what he was told to teach. Basically, it's the 3 primary nutrients, 3 secondary nutrients, and 10 micronutrients. That was what's recognized in the ag industry.
So we've now added nickel and cobalt to the list. So 18 plant nutrients are recognized.
Oh, great! I can update my presentation. I love that. Nickel and cobalt. I'm going to have to add that to my notes.
So you always need to remember, science is designed to minimize the risk of a type 1 error. We don't want to say something is true when it's not. What you lose by doing that is you increase the risk of a type 2 error. You increase the risk of saying something is not true when it is. And I think 50% of the adult population in the United States is sick today because we are being killed by type 2 errors. We're saying we don't need all these minerals because we don't have the hard data saying that we do need them. But we haven't really done the test to prove one way or the other.
And Mary, this is what's real interesting, is that I've had people from the head of the ag department in the university sit in my lectures. And they've called me afterwards and, Marvin, I think you're onto something. And they want me to pay them to do research on my concept. I says, hold on here. I said, I understand that you thrive on the idea of government grants and things like that. I don't have that kind of money. Okay, I already know the product works. So what's wrong with taking a product and educating your ag students that this is the future of future farmers of America? This is what we're going to be headed towards. And Mary, this is what's astounding to me. We spend billions of dollars to mapping out the genome. We should be spending that money into mapping out the genetic makeup of our soil and what we could do to make our soil healthier.
Can I jump in with?
Yeah, is this Katerina?
Listening to you speak, I'm coming back with some of my anecdotal information. Having shown animals and raised animals myself some 40 years ago, before the advent of Roundup was real big, and today. And I've scratched my head in frustration many times thinking, what happened to our species? We didn't have to do all these crazy medications and treatments to our show animals years ago. What have we done to them? And I'm beginning to put it together. It's the soil. You're noticing that the people are sick. I've got a list of medications and treatments that I have to do for these animals that we didn't even conceive of when we were kids. And I think we're starving our soil. And I think a lot of it's just a theory, non-scientific at all, but I'm thinking it has to do something with the Roundup and the pesticides that we've increased the use of over the years.
I'm glad you brought that up, because if you look at across the nation, I do a lot of traveling. Across the nation, you see millions of cats and dogs dying in these urban areas. And you can go to any small vet hospital. You can sit there for half an hour, and these people are coming in and leaving with bags of medications for their pets. I've never seen anything of the likes. We are commercializing drugs to our household cats and dogs now. And we had a Himalayan Siamese, and we had to take her off all grain and put her on a 100% gluten-free diet because her digestive system started to fail, her kidneys started to fail. And now we're finding, if you look at the pet stores, you'll see more choices of gluten-free cat and dog food than you've ever done before. And so you're absolutely right. These show animals that are showing now, I mean, they are living on medications. That is not what it used to be back 30, 40 years ago. We didn't have thyroid medication for Fluffy or Spot. Now we do. But the soil, the problem we have is that if the farmer is not taught to remineralize that soil, then what we have to do as responsible pet owners and animal farmers, we have to then nutrify that feed in a way to where it keeps those animals healthy. And I want to give you a little testimony here. I love cats. My wife and I and I have 2 children. We've got 3 household cats, and we always ask people before they come over, they're allergic to pets, and a lot of people, well, we're cat allergies. Well, we had a guest over a little over a year ago, and he was a doctor from Davenport, Iowa. Now, I forgot to ask, he was planning on staying at our place for about a week. And I forgot to ask him if he had any pet allergies. So he stayed at the guest bedroom. He shows up, and the next morning he came up for breakfast, and of course the cat shows up and wants to fluff up. He said, "Oh my God, you've got cats." I said, "I'm allergic to cats." And I says, "Oh no, I didn't know that." But he says, "Oh, but if I'm allergic to cats, but I usually within 30 minutes time, my eyes are swelling shut and I'm choking and I have to go get some medication." But so we immediately put the cats down, put the cats in the bedroom, got away from him because we didn't want to have a medical crisis here. But he never had any symptoms of cat allergies. For the 5 days he stayed at our place, he not had one symptom of a cat allergy. And we were thinking, now he knows that he has cat allergies. And so about the 4th day, him and I ran an errand. We got into my wife's SUV. And before we got out of the driveway, he said, "Stop, Marvin, stop. I have got to get out of his vehicle. There's a cat in his vehicle." And he got out of the vehicle, and his eyes and his face started to swell up. And see, what happened is that we had brought those 2 cats back from Missouri, from the farm, as 4-week-old baby kittens before they were nutrified with minerals in their cat food. And they had lived in that car for 2 days. We brought them home, we fed them, and then what we did is we nutrified their we sprayed plant minerals on their cat food. And their hair is nice and silky. They don't have the mucus and the milky nose or eyes, cloudy eyes. But there's still enough, I don't know if it's skin particles or hair or whatever in that SUV, that he reacted to it very quickly. And these are leather seats. These are leather seats. This is not, so I don't know if it was on the leather or was it the carpet or wherever, but there was enough residual cat stuff in there that he reacted to it, but he did not react to those other cats, the same cats in the house, which were adult cats. And so the day of when he left, he said, I want to just double check and make sure. I want to be able to pick up this cat and I'm going to fluff it. So he picked up both cats and fluffed them. He had no symptoms of cat allergies. But when he got in that car, he did. And I thought that was very profound. So with that said, when our house cats, we have them nutrified with the 75 different minerals. You just spray those minerals on their cat and dog food. And they are the healthiest. Their coats are nice and slick. We don't take them to the vet. They're not on any medications. We don't have to take them to the vet. And it's just an amazing night and day difference when we nutrify that cat food with these minerals, and we have the same success with dogs. I have hundreds of dogs across the nation and dog breeders who are using these minerals, and they have eliminated these birth defects. They've eliminated all these different problems with these animals that they have when it comes to typical dog breeders, right? For example, if you have a puppy that's bred with club feet, they just kill them. I talk to dog breeders all the time that they tell me 1/3 of their puppy population, they have to really knock on top of the head and just throw them away in the ditch because they have some kind of a birth defect. Once you put them on minerals, this recommended amount of minerals per body weight, we have literally eliminated that problem. I mean, we may have less than 1%, if that, of birth defects or runt in those litters. And it's a huge difference. I mean, I can tell you these dog owners are ecstatic about the results they're getting from the minerals adding to the breeding program.